Now call Stuart Stevenson to wind up the debate. Up to 7 minutes, Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And let me start by congratulating Gavin Brown for raising this debate. And let me just enter some personal experience as Transport Minister by saying that since coming into office on the 17th of May 2007 up to the 5th of November, I do my counting monthly, I've made 436 ministerial rail journeys and 116 ministerial bus journeys. So therefore I don't speak from the position of the abstract theoretician, but from the position of the engaged user of Scotland's public transport network. And of course, this government's economic strategy and our whole focus on transport is to make better connections across Scotland, improve reliability, reduce journey times, maximise opportunities for employment, business, leisure and tourism. We will, of course, hear a great deal more about transport in the Strategic Transport Projects Review statement I shall be making to Parliament next week. Let me acknowledge at the outset the very clear support there is in many parts of Edinburgh. 8 groups were named by Gavin Brown, and I recognise the commitment and sincerity of these various people. Let me just try and pick up one or two of the points that have been raised in the debate. Gavin Brown made the point about picking out of the report the impact of road traffic. Certainly that's in there. He reminisced, I think it was him anyway, of a 7-minute journey from Morningside. And clearly there are advantages to such rail provision for passengers. He also highlighted, of course, 50 freight trains are using this railway each day at the moment. And that's not an inconsiderable issue in considering what can be done. He mentioned also the station locations are already known. Well, yes, that is indeed true. Christopher Harvey highlighted, of course, that there are issues potentially in bringing these stations back into use. And in particular, with much of the route of an elevated character, there are very substantial issues under disability legislation that would substantially increase the cost from what one might imagine and what previously might have been thought of. So this is not as cheap an option as it would appear when you have a working railway line fully signalled and joined to the network. So there are a range of issues. Now, why does the report most recently provided not provide a cost-benefit ratio? Well, of course, the report has been produced using the Scottish Transport Appraisal Guidance. That is primarily about identifying what transport problem exists and from that seeking to identify what is the appropriate solution. It is not about evaluating whether we should have a railway through South Suburban Edinburgh. And in terms of where it's taken that study, it's not yet developed to the point where it would be reasonable or appropriate to update the cost-benefit ratio. Now, having said that, I'm not going to pick at or criticise the previous figures that have been produced. But what I am going to develop is the issue of resources and where they should best be deployed. Because the big issue, in a sense, is, as Chris Harvey highlighted, in the switches that join the South Suburban loop to the main line. There are quite substantial costs in upgrading such switches. We've just recently gone through an upgrade in connecting the Bathgate line to the main line, taking a dual line merged into one single connection to the main network to be a fully double connection. That closed the whole network for a week over last Christmas and cost a very substantial amount of money. We would certainly need to do that sort of thing. And the Bathgate line, we're talking about much lower utilisations than ones that have been talked about here. But more fundamentally, the big problem is capacity at the 2 main stations that we have in Edinburgh and the use to which we should put that scarce capacity. And I'll come back to that very, very shortly. Robin Harper, obviously a former pupil of the Royal High School. I'm not quite sure where David McCletchie went. I have a suspicion it was a rival school in Edinburgh from his remarks. he suggested I should sit down and talk to the City of Edinburgh Council. As an enthusiast for public transport, I'm always happy to do that sort of thing, and if that is helpful, then of course I will do so. But I think the carbon contribution was a key point that Robin Harper latched on, and quite properly so. There would be a carbon benefit from getting more people off the roads and onto the South Suburban line. However, we have to compare it with the carbon benefit that there would be from using the slots at Haymarket and at Waverley for longer distances where the carbon reduction is likely to be less. He also highlighted the issue of signalling. Well, we are in the UK, in the British Isles, looking at the European signalling system, which is essentially a moving block system which improves the utilisation of rail lines, although I do point out the new timetable for Kirkcaldy has something like, from memory, 12 trains an hour, so we can do quite well in the existing system. The European system is being piloted in the Cambrian system elsewhere quite soon, and we would expect to see that here. Certainly we need investments in rail signalling if we're going to improve. A little extra signalling, Ian McKee said no. He asked a number of questions, some of which I can answer. One of the reasons the users' estimates are variable is because actually the routes that were being looked at were somewhat different. And I think also we have to look at, you get people onto rail, you get them out of bus. When you look at the whole system, it's not as clear-cut as some people might suggest. 6 to 7 rail stations, yes, the costs might be quite high. Margaret MacDonald said we can open them up by engineering. Yes, engineering can solve almost every problem, but it may, as she suggests, be constrained by this deaved Transport Minister. The key difficulty is the Harcrow study has not identified a transport problem that requires to be solved. We're already seeing significant changes to our network. The adjacent corridors supported by the development of Edinburgh Park services through to New Craighall, the Edinburgh Tram Link, not something that there was huge enthusiasm on these benches for, but nonetheless it's part of Edinburgh's transport infrastructure. Joining tram and train, these are all things we do. The Waverley Borders line and recent improvements to Edinburgh-Glasgow connections, increasing frequency, increasing speed. I think the bottom line for the moment for the government is that on the basis of the information available, the opening of the Edinburgh South Suburban line would not be the most cost-effective use of the scarce resources we have. However, I do hold out that olive leaf that I'm entirely happy, as an enthusiast for expanding the rail network, if there are things that City of Edinburgh Council wishes to put to me and discuss with me, I'm very happy to sit down with them. But I don't want to raise expectations to the point where they simply can't be fulfilled. With scarce resources, we have to make choices. Presiding Officer.
I now close this meeting of Parliament.